Hi, welcome to Yeldcast. My name is Jake Richmond. I'm here with Nick Smith, my brother and the co-creator of the Magical Land of Yeld role-playing game. Yeldcast is our program where we talk about what we're doing with the Magical Land of Yeld, what kind of stuff we're designing, what we're working on for the future, and what kind of stuff we've just released. Today, we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, and the first thing we're going to discuss is our new Witch Job Guide. Our job guides are a series of books that are about the individual heroic jobs. Those are like classes if you're more used to playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is my favorite heroic job. So this was a really exciting project for me to work on. Although mostly I only worked on the art for this. Nick was the one who wrote the entirety of the Witch Job Guide. So do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, welcome everybody. For everybody who's watching later on. The Witch Job Guide, this is our fourth guide, like Jake said, and before we've done Black Mage, Shepherd, Soul Thief. Each one of those was a really fun experience, but I think this one has definitely been like the most fun and probably our best work so far. We've learned a lot from making the other jobs, just figuring out, how to design these guides to, cater to our players. What sort of things these jobs need to expand on and how they can expand play-wise past sort of the basic stuff we give them in the main book. And also just, sort of coming up with the lore and expanding the world in a way that I think will more engage with the players because it's specific to their jobs.
That was actually my favorite thing about the Witch book. In our previous job guides and a lot of the Yeld stuff we do, we talk about the past, Yeld's past, its long history. In the Soul Thief job guide, for example, we talk about the origins of the Soul Thief job that go all the way back before the time of the Old Kings. And when you play a Soul Thief, we talk about how maybe you're the very last Soul Thief or you're one of a dying breed. But with the Witch job guide, the witch job is very much a modern thing in Yeld, and the history of witches is about stuff that's happening right now. So the world building that we do in Witches and the stuff you wrote for it feels very immediate and very modern. It's not the history of Yeld so much, but it's the stuff that you can engage with in your games, like right now, which I think is really cool and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think people really attach to the idea that, like, witches are this new power in Yeld, and what we've shown in the other job guides is that each one of these heroic jobs has had sort of its peak at some point, right? But that was long ago. Black mages, had their moments, but they were taken down. Witch hunters had their moments, but they had to be disbanded. Soul thieves have had their moments, but they were taken out basically by one of their own. But witches are sort of flourishing right now, and so we get to sort of explain, how they're influencing Yeld, what their goals are, how they're sort of, influencing the culture of Yeld and the people of Yeld and changing what the word witch means there. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Not only that way, just mechanically, we came up with some really neat stuff. A lot of different ideas went through the guide that just didn't make it in because we didn't think it quite fit. We'd come up with several.
Yeah, this was one of the first times where one of us wrote something and the other, well, specifically, you had an idea, a very cool idea that a new job ability for witches would be shape changing. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool too. But then, this is going to make me sound like an asshole, but when you presented the idea, when you said, here's how I want it to work, I was just like, no, I hate that. Which I think is the first time that's really happened, that one of us disagreed hard on something.
I mean, possibly, but for the most part, we're pretty much of a single mind when it comes to Yeld stuff. But yeah, I think it's also that was just sort of the presentation I had sort of put into it. So in my mind, shapeshifting ended up being sort of a very simple idea. And I guess I had a lot of influence from stuff like World of Warcraft, because I think when I approached it, I thought these will be sort of a series of forms that will each have a simple utility and potentially kind of step on the toes of another job, wanting to do something like support or damage or sort of tanking. And I think you saw that immediately and hated that because you didn't like it back then, and you certainly don't have to like it now. And I get it, right?
Yeah.
I 100% understand that.
I was
and
never
so
a
when we were
fan of druids in World of Warcraft, or for that matter, of druids in Dungeons and Dragons. I always found that kind of shape shifting into like one set role very boring. And so because of that, I kind of lit up with the idea that, the job could be so much more. So I came back with a version of it, which, as you rightfully pointed out, was just way, way too complicated.
Right.
It ended up being basically a set of other jobs that the witch could turn into with their own job abilities and special dice, and it was just too much.
And again, an awesome idea, but like when we tried to find that, that ground to compromise on, we just figured that what we had created and what we would want it to do would just be too much, right? It would have to end up being its own job altogether. And so maybe, at some point we will find an awesome monster job that can do this, or an advanced job that does this.
Sure.
But it didn't fit for the witch. So we kept going. We tried to find another sort of job ability to match what we wanted the witch to do. And the second step is, I think we came to effigies. And effigies was based off of some of the lore we already kind of have in Yeld about like the Witchfire Festival where they burn effigies. And it was built around an idea that Jake had previously about sort of having the witch have an ability that allowed them to have sort of a mirror image of themselves or something similar. And so they would have sort of a called monster, but it would respond directly to how you acted as a player.
Right.
And I'm sure you can, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, there's this monster that I love in the Zelda games, and I can never remember what it's called. I really should have looked it up before we did this. But how it works is it mirrors your action. So when it's facing you, if you move in this direction, it moves in this direction. If you attack, it attacks. And I thought it would be really cool to give Witch something that they could build and then place on the action board, and they could touch it, or a friend could touch it, or even a monster could touch it, and they would gain control of it, and it would mirror their actions. So it would, if the witch moved 3 spaces forward, it would move 3 spaces forward. If the witch attacked, it would attack as well. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was a real fun, this neat thing to put on the battlefield that could be taken control of by anybody. But like you said, it creates another presence on the battlefield, and as you pointed out, we already have White Mage with all their calls, and now Black Mages also have some call spells. And of course, there's call spells within Blue Magic and Deep Magic, and there's call spells within Red Magic, and there's Sheep, and more and more and more stuff. And if you've played Yeld before, I think you know that you've played Yeld before, of course. But for our listeners, if you've played Yeld before, you know that it's a very tactical game, and it can get bogged down if you have too many pieces on the action board. And just introducing another one of those really was too much.
Right. And it's too bad, because I think the effigy concept is really cool, because it sort of feeds into the voodoo doll stuff that comes with Witch that we've already set up, right? It's an awesome idea. Again, we just couldn't find the right execution for it and couldn't find a good compromise.
But I think what it led to was really good, because just like the effigy idea complemented voodoo doll and was kind of an opposite of that, what you came up with was very much the opposite of the curse ability that witches already have, and I think it fits witches much better and gives them a much clearer and more distinct role.
I think the charm job ability, which is something that witches get starting at rank 2, it's sort of it mirrors the curses, and I think in a way that's really satisfying to me design wise, and I hope it is for players as well. And it's going to allow you, to go from being super offensive to more supportive, which I think is a great role for Witch, because design-wise, Witch has always been a very supportive role. Right. You're not the biggest damage dealer, you're not a big tank, but your job is to debuff the enemies and now support your friends in a way that you couldn't before.
Right.
And so, I think it really fit a good place, and it sort of matched a lot of the themes we have in Witch, which is about sort of two sides of the same coin. We see that in special dice as well, with both Witch Courage and Witch Fear, which kind of represent the witch's sort of indomitable ability to succeed, and also sort of Yeld's history with witches and their general angst and fear about them. And I think those are both really cool special dice, along with Dive Bomb
and Crash Landing.
and Crash Landing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Crash Landing was a great addition. I remember when we wrote Dive Bomb. So when we were designing Yeld, which was the last job we designed. Originally, Vampire was one of our 8, or Vampire Hunter was one of our 8 original jobs, and we decided to make that an advanced job, and we brought in Witch as a core job instead. So Witch, in some ways, became our most complete job, I feel, because it was the last one we did, and we already had the experience from the others.
Yeah.
And I remember when we came up with the Dive Bomb special die, it really made Witch click for me as kind of a risk versus reward job. Similar to the Soul Thief. The Soul Thief has some of the same things going on. Which is very much about finding that knife edge to live on, and where you're going to hit as hard as you can, but you can't hit too hard, both because of your limitations and because you want to just be rolling a certain amount of dice that's very similar to the monsters dice. So Crash Landing is like the other half of that finally, and I think it works really well.
I agree. I think it's fun. I really like how we managed to come up with sort of these mirrored ideas, and I think that's why it's definitely our best guide so far. Really happy with it. Definitely check it out if you haven't yet. If you're a Patreon member, you already have it. Otherwise, it's totally available everywhere we sell Yeld, I think.
Yep, it's available on the Modest Medusa store, which you can get to from the Yeld website or the Modest Medusa website, and it's available on DrivethruRPG. We'll have print copies for sale by the end of the year as well. There's a few more things I want to mention about the Witch Guide, which I really like. I love the 4 new witch covens that you came up with.
Yeah.
I thought all 4 of those were fantastic.
Yeah, the covens are really cool. Sort of trying to explore what witches would do in Yeld, right? Like, when they build covens, they're doing so to sort of create found family, sort of develop their own kind of communities to survive in, and hopefully shape Yeld in whatever way they see fit. And so we get to see sort of 4 distinct ways that happens, with the Thornborough Coven, the Terra Coven, the Rot Dancers, and the Second Shore, right? Each one of these now has like this really unique role in Yeld. And specifically, it shows that like witches are more than just kind of running around in the wild, not really influencing anything. They have huge influence on Yeld. They have huge influence over the deep. And the Terra Coven has a huge amount of influence even over Dragul because they're sitting on a nuclear missile, right, ready to go.
I loved that idea. When I read your first draft, I was mostly skimming it for content and for proofreading purposes, and I came across the nuclear missile, and I had to double back and go, wait a minute, they have a missile.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you need, your nuclear deterrent, right? You don't want Dragul to get in your business. You just want to be left alone. Then, well, that's the way to do it in Yeld.
I love the idea that most of Yeld's witches are children from our world who came to Yeld. They're heroes, and became witches, or they're the children of those witches from our world, right. Or in some cases they're people of Yeld who went to join those witches. So it's all children from our world and their descendants and their friends who are trying to shape Yeld. And with the covens, they're each doing that in a really distinct way, which is really, really cool. And in the case of the Rot Dancers, who went to work with Dragul, and the Second Shore, who went to work with the Deep, you've got these covens who have gone to take the side of what we traditionally think of as our enemies in Yeld. But then you have the Terra Coven, who was just like, we like Earth, we want all the stuff from Earth, so they're collecting Earth artifacts, and that they get their hands on this nuclear missile as a deterrent against the Prince is just, in my mind, just hilarious and really actually evocative. The first thing I thought about, and this is old as hell, but the second or third or fourth Planet of the Apes movie, where the surviving humans are worshipping a nuclear missile underground.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that was like 1,000 years before you were born, so I don't know if you've ever seen it. But it was such a great idea.
Well, I like the idea that, like, the Terra Coven they find power in stuff from Earth, and what's one of the most powerful things you could find on Earth? It's the ability to create this horrible weapon.
Right.
So I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I think it provides some really fun stuff, and I think introducing these covens allows players to sort of build adventures around them as well, right? Mm-hmm. There's no reason to not have rot dancers running around as an enemy you have to deal with, right? They can easily be a monster, and in fact, we add a new monster title in, so you can create your own witch covens and have monsters running around as a coven.
Yeah, and I think the rot dancers and the second shore, or really the other two covens as well, make really interesting enemies if you want witches as enemies in your campaign, or even not enemies necessarily, but antagonists of some kind. It's also great that I think when we originally conceived Witch, I spent a lot of time thinking of Witch as you were off wild on your own, you were outside of society, you're rebellious, and these covens definitely are. But these covens also give a different aspect of Witch, which is one about community building and making a place in society, and that's just really exciting, I think.
I think overall it's a really interesting job focused on more of the positives in Yeld, right? Because a lot of the time with the other jobs that there's some darker material there, especially because they deal with the idea that these jobs are sort of fallen at this point. They're not in mass running around helping people. But which is there, which is alive, and they are making Yeld better, right?
They're carving out a place for themselves. Yeah, no, I really like that. The other thing I loved about the Witch Guide is the Witch House, which I think when I first read the description, I didn't really understand what you were trying to do with it. And it just said, at the time, it just said Witch Wagon. And the Witch Wagon is a quest reward that you get from Gretchen the Crow Girl, who is the new mentor we introduce in this book. And I saw Witch Wagon, and I thought to myself, oh, okay, I'll draw a picture of a wagon. That's what it's going to be. And then you were like, no, it has feet. And immediately I started thinking of Howl's Moving Castle, which is kind of what it became.
Well, and yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a lot of instances of sort of like that living or like monster house thing that goes with like witches.
No, the Baba Yaga's chicken house, of course.
Exactly, yeah. The Baba Yaga is a perfect example of that. I like, or like Stardust, where they have sort of the carriage being drawn, I think.
Right, sure.
Not being drawn by anyone. It's sort of on its own. But yeah, I think it's a fun idea, and yeah, definitely a heavy influence from Howl's Moving Castle for that. I feel like there's a lot of Miyazaki influence for witch stuff, right? Kiki's Delivery Service is definitely an influence for witch.
Yeah,
Howl's Moving Castle for sure.
Mm-hmm. This is definitely our most Miyazaki influenced Yeld product, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I love that the witch house is both this giant living house that follows you around, but it also becomes, well, with these job guides, we try to offer really cool and unique rewards that you can acquire. So, for example, I think in the Black Mage Guide we had a really cool staff that a Black Mage can get, and in the Shepherd's Guide we had, I don't remember what we had. I think it was a bow. Anyway, we try to provide like a really cool, powerful reward. But for the Witch House, you came up with this idea that it would just be like it's this headquarters that you get, and it doesn't just benefit you as a witch, but it benefits all the friends. Your entire party has this huge boon of this headquarters that follows you around, and you can live in it. And it provides unique benefits, and the benefits grow as you rank up, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think specifically sort of the treasures for completing mentor quests have developed over we've done these jobs, right? So it started with Black Mage, and it was a little bit easier. I think it was the doll. It's not a staff.
You're right. I'm conflating.
Doll.
I'm conflating the mentor rewards with the mastery rewards.
Yeah, and the doll is a very unique item that does some really cool stuff, and we've definitely just kept pushing. What these things can do. With Shepherd, it was that your mentor would make sweaters for you, right? And you'd collect wool, and he'd make special sweaters. With the Soul Thief Guide, the mentor allowed you to tattoo yourself and friends
Right.
with like unique Soul Thief tattoos. So
Which
there's
is such
definitely
a
like
fun
really
ability, by the way,
powerful,
yeah.
yeah, like there's really powerful rewards from these like mentor quests, right? And so we wanted the witch to have something also super unique, and I feel like this is probably top tier coolest one so far.
I think it's definitely the
Just the
coolest reward that you can get in Yeld. One of the things I like about it is it's not a reward without cost.
oh yeah,
You have to maintain the house. And if you don't maintain the house starts to break down and also gets grumpy with you. And the way you maintain it is you have to take it to goblins, and the goblins are going to fix it up and
yeah,
going to repair it. So, as a witch, and you have to kind of decide if the cost of this of maintaining the house, both in money and in time that you invest in it, because you have to bring it. So you have to travel to a goblin trading post, which are called knives. You have to travel to a goblin knife or somewhere else where goblins are. You have to pay them a bunch of money, and you have to leave the house with them for a certain time. And that's a huge amount of investment that you have to do every season, or maybe every other season, if you want to let the house fall into
yeah.
disrepair. And I know sometimes players can look at something like that and go, "Oh, that's such an inconvenience." But I think instead it's a great opportunity for role play and storytelling. You get to develop a
Yeah.
relationship with these goblins. You get to develop a relationship with the house. You have to make these decisions
Mhm.
about how you're spending your money and how it has real effects on you and your other friends. And this isn't just unlike the rewards for other jobs. This isn't just a decision that affects you, but it affects everybody, which I think is
Yeah,
really cool.
exactly. Well, and I love to think of it sort of the way that it's like in like Firefly with the ship, or the Bebop in Cowboy Bebop,
Sure.
or whatever it's called in Outlaw Star. I think it's called the
Or
Outlaw
the
Star.
Millennium Falcon.
Exactly. It becomes the centerpiece, and it's
Hmm.
like we're traveling with this thing, and we have to take it from point A to point B, and usually that means we got to repair it. Right? We're
Right.
in like the Mandalorian, where every time he hits port, his ship is falling apart, and he
Right.
just has to get it just enough repaired. I think that's really fun, and I think it
I think so
adds
too.
sort of this whole new level of depth to sort of having to travel around,
Hmm.
because it's giving all these excellent rewards, right?
Right. Wait,
So I think
tell
the
us about the
trade-off
rewards
is
it offers, because we haven't mentioned those yet.
yeah, so it's like you have these set of like modular rooms, right? And you have more rooms based off of your rank. So the higher rank you get, the more rooms you have available. And each one of these is going to give your friends access to unique stuff, right? So if you want a bunk room, that's going to allow a friend to stay in it as if it was an inn, right? And they're going to gain back some dice from sleeping there. If you want a room for chores, you can get a craft room, I think is what we called it, or a rec room, and that rec room is going to make or allow you to do chores, I think, one additional time
Right.
each adventure. A very powerful ability. You have the ability to choose a merchant or a mentor or a job trainer and have them stay with you in the witch wagon. That means you always have access to them, which is awesome, right?
Right.
That could even be a weapon crafter, right? So you just have a crafter on hand, always
Sure.
ready to go. Don't even have to worry about having them mail you your awesome sword. They're just there. So there's some really neat effects. I think you added one which I really liked, which is the idea of a pet room where you could leave a called monster in there and it gets like extra bonuses, which I
Right.
love. I
Yeah.
think that's great as well.
Yeah. I think there's one or two others we're forgetting as well. But it's a set of really great options that you can customize, and I just love that so much. I'm excited to bring it into our own games.
Yeah, totally. I'm really excited to see our witch use all these new tools and to see what he does with it.
A minute ago, you were talking about how the kind of power scale of what we've done with rewards in the job guide has changed. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking how it's interesting how we distribute power throughout the job guides. Because when we started these job guides, one of the goals was definitely to flesh out each job and give them more fun options.
Mhm.
And the first one we did was Black Mage, and what we did there was we mostly just decided we didn't give Black Mage a second job ability like all the others get. Instead, we just said Black Mages get a bunch more spells. Here's a bunch of extra
Yeah,
spells that you can start casting once you reach rank 2. And we gave them some special dice, and there's a mentor and some other stuff, but it was mostly just cool spells.
yeah,
And so that's where we decided the Black Mage's power was going to be. But when we moved on to Shepherd, you introduced the idea of the road hymns job ability, right?
Yeah, road hymns were an interesting addition because I wanted shepherds to feel like singing was already a thing, right? We had already introduced the idea of the shepherd song, and it had some really interesting mechanics. But I definitely wanted to push more of that idea, right?
Sure.
And this allowed shepherds to do a whole new thing, introducing sort of a series of buffs, which I think is really useful, right? And so back to the black mage, I don't think our black mage nor our white mage, when we finally get to that guide, is necessarily going to have another job, or job ability.
Right. Yeah.
Because the spells are such a versatile tool that we can just keep adding to that I don't feel like they really need one, right? I think they're in a comfortable position to just expand on what's already there.
I think
where a lot of the other jobs
Yeah.
would, benefit from an additional job ability at rank 2 or rank 3.
It's totally not impossible that we might decide to give White Mage some power in the form of a new job ability, but honestly, yeah, I expect we're just going to give them a bunch of new White Mage spells, which
Yeah,
I'm actually
when
really
we get
excited
around to that one. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, spells are both fun to write, but also kind of difficult because you don't want to step on the toes of another spell. You don't want it to feel like it doesn't belong in that color of magic, right?
Well,
so that's definitely going to be, I think, a tougher guide to make.
Well, that's a good segue to start talking about our next expansion, which will actually be out next week. This is called Magical Index, and it is a little different from anything we've done before. Magical Index is kind of a housekeeping project for us in that what the book is a collection of every spell we've released for the role-playing game all in one book. Something that our players have said over and over again is, can you please put the spells all in one place so they're really easy to find and really easy to access? So we've done that. We've published, I think, about 106 spells all in one book, and that includes about 15 brand new spells, as well as a whole bunch of spells that you've probably never seen before because they showed up in really obscure places in the past, like our first summer collection or on our Patreon. So all the spells in new places. But more importantly than that, from the housekeeping perspective, we kind of went through the rule book and kind of re-clarified how you acquire spells and some of our spell systems. When we first started working on the game, we decided to have a very simple spell system. It was basically black mages can cast 10 black spells, and white mages can cast 10 white spells, and deep mages can cast 10 blue spells, and that was pretty much it. But as we've grown the game, we've realized that we want more spells. Like in the Black Mage book, we just put out a ton of new spells. And we also decided that, it was really cool to have deep mages casting other stuff besides just deep magic, and black mages casting other stuff besides just black magic. So what we've done with the Magical Index is we've reclarified exactly what spellcasters can cast what. For example, as a black mage, you're going to be able to cast your black mage spells, as well as primal black spells, which are kind of generic black spells that are common amongst Yeld spellcasters. You're going to be able to cast primal red spells, primal blue spells, primal green spells, and goat spells, and math spells, and mermaid spells, and I'm probably missing a few. So the end result is, if you're a spellcaster, if you're a black mage or a red mage or a warrant mage or any of the other spellcasting jobs, you're going to be able to cast a lot more spells than you did before, which is going to open up some really exciting ground for you.
Yeah, I think sort of as a quality of life document, I think it's really helpful, especially because it's going to be like a living document that we keep adding to, right? So this will be a place you can keep coming back to every time we put out something that's going to have spells. It'll be in the book. It'll have its place. You'll know exactly what tags it fits under and who can use it very easily, which is what I really like. I feel like because we keep expanding, there can be, that confusion of like, who gets this, who gets that,
right.
How do you codify a spell? And I think this is a great way of doing it. And I think codex like this or an index like this is something we might even do for special dice at some point. Just so it's like, here's all of these special dice from all over the place, nice in one nice place that'll be in a living document that people can look at whenever they need to. Yeah, super helpful. I think just quality of life is a great thing for players. Anything that makes your experience easier is, of course, the best, right?
Yeah. I think people are gonna. I think if you're a spellcasting player, if you play one of these jobs where you get to cast spells, I think you're going to get a lot of use out of this, and you're going to really like it. We introduced some new spells here. I mentioned that there's about 15 new spells. We expanded the math list, so there's a few new math formulas. There's a few new goat spells, including one that allows you to change yourself into a goat. It's the only goat spell that you can cast if you're not already a goat. And what it does is it allows you to change into a goat, so you can cast more goat spells. What else is there? There's some new mermaid spells.
Yeah,
We've subdivided deep spells and blue spells into two completely separate lists, and
right.
now there's 10 of each. So there's a bunch of new deep spells and blue spells. There's a completely new type of magic called grave magic, and there's only one spell there at the moment, and it's a kind of black magic, so black mages will be able to cast that. I'm probably
Same with
forgetting.
green. There's only a
Oh,
single
yeah.
green spell at the moment. But again, these will be lists that will grow over time,
Right.
especially, I think, once we really fully understand what we want to do with grave magic, what we want to do with green magic. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of new options in there, which is exciting. I think I really like that red spell you wrote about dropping a giant boulder.
Oh, yeah, 10
Because
ton
that just
hammer.
seems,
Yeah, no,
it's like, I feel like
it's fantastic.
it might be the only direct damaging red spell.
Uh, Aside from Skeleton Eyes, which is the spell you get
Oh,
from
right.
beating the Hunter of Yeld Karagor. Yeah, no, 10 ton
That's right.
hammer allows you to choose a space on the action board and just drop an enormous stone on it. And it does damage to everybody around it. And if they can't get away, it does even more. If they can't move out of the way because they're blocked in by other people, it does even more damage. But also, it creates this space you can't move into anymore because there's a giant boulder there. So if you want to move through it, you have to use jump or climb or fly. So I think that's a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff I think we will definitely be expanding on as we approach more stuff about terrain on the action board and things like
Yeah,
that
I'm
in our
really
new,
excited about that.
yeah, the new expansion that we're coming out, our new big book that we will have out soon. We'll be covering stuff like that, right? Different terrain rules, expanding on sort of unique fight mechanics, and talking more about monsters and Yeld just in general.
Let's talk about the new book. It's
Yeah.
going to be called The Monster Hunter's Guide to Yeld. It is our second core book. We think it'll be about the same size as the first Yeld rule book. It's not a replacement for that book. It's a sequel, where the original rule book, explains all the rules and explains the basic Yeld campaign. It also kind of really focuses on rank 1 and 2, and this book will provide a lot more options for ranks 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, we definitely want to expand on late game opportunities for like really unique combat, really unique monsters. We also want to do more stuff on the player end, right? There's going to be a new heroic job, which is a first since the core book, a
Yeah.
bunch of new advanced jobs, a bunch of new monster jobs, even a new friend type, which is again something we don't do very often. So lots of stuff for both players and GM, right? Hopefully you're doing both of those roles.
Right. Let's get back to that in a second, but first let's talk about some of these new jobs. Our new heroic job, and for those of you who don't know, heroic jobs are like your classes. We have 8 heroic jobs in the game, and they're the basic roles that the players play, like Soul Thief and Black Mage and Witch. So our new one is called Monster Hunter, and it's very blatantly inspired by our favorite game series.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Monster Hunter is exactly what it sounds like. Monster Hunter is all about finding monsters, knowing their weaknesses, beating them up, and then taking their monster parts to make cooler equipment, better weapons, better armor, neat gear, neat shields, right? So it's all about specializing what kind of monsters you're fighting, being good against certain types of monsters, and getting to craft all kinds of neat stuff. We have jobs that craft things, but I think this is sort of expanding on that idea. And yeah. So I think one of the ideas that I really like about it is the idea that because you're creating so much equipment, your special dice sort of reflect the idea that you can waste it or be reckless with your equipment because you can always make more, right?
Right.
So the idea of trading off more powerful attacks or a better defense, but at a loss of dice, right? So maybe it breaks the weapon, maybe it breaks the armor, or some other effect, right? So some neat trade-offs, which I really like.
I really like the idea of Monster Hunter. The story I've been developing for this book, much like in when we created the first book, we developed a story of these 8 friends, nine if you count the dog, who come to Yeld and discover the magical land. The story I'm developing here is about a brother and a sister who come to Yeld and get separated, and she turns into a monster, and he meets a group of fairy hunters who teach him to be a monster hunter, and then he hunts her down, not to hurt her, although you think that's what he's going to do, but instead to save her, and so he can be with her, and he can convince her that even though she's become this monster, she can they can still be together, and they can still work together to try to find their way home again. And I just really love the visuals, the visual idea of this young monster hunter tracking through the snow, waist deep in the snow, followed by these giant fairies who have trained him as he's searching for his sister with his homemade weapons and armor. That's just such a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think getting to play with the idea of the monster hunter being able to manipulate monster titles, because we're going to be introducing a lot more stuff like that in the book too. So yeah, lots of fun stuff. I think it'll be an interesting new addition to the heroic job, sort of fitting in the category of how Witch Hunter or Oathbreaker currently play, which are sort of the heavier, tankier side. I also think they may be the only heroic job that gets to have pole arms.
Oh, cool.
Usually pole arms are dedicated to advanced jobs or monster jobs. So this will be really cool. Yeah.
I remember you said before that uh, some of the things you want to do with Monster Hunter are actually ideas that we originally developed for Oathbreaker and Witch Hunter, but we put to the
Yeah.
side because we wanted to go in a different direction for those jobs.
Yeah, a lot of like I said, a lot of these sort of reckless uses of your weapons and armor were ideas that could have belonged to those, but ended up getting on the sideline. We did end up using one of the concepts with the Boulder Knight advanced job. They have an ability called Meteor Tackle, which is sort of this full body tackle you can do, and you get to add all of your armor to it. But when you do it, you lose armor, right? So sort of in that vein. That's sort of a flavor or a tease of what you're going to see with the Monster Hunter.
We also have several advanced jobs and monster jobs planned.
Oh yeah,
In fact, I think at this point we're not really even sure how many we're going to do. But we have a bunch. We've each been working on a few of them. For example, the Monster Mage is an interesting example because it is,
yeah,
I think, the very first advanced job we ever designed way back in the early days of Yeld, years and years ago. And at the time, its basic idea was something like the monster mage learns magic from monsters. It was very simple. And then over the years, we've gone in distinctly different directions as designers with that.
yeah,
You have an idea for it, and I have an idea for it, and what we've decided is that actually has to become two completely different jobs. So the job I've been
yeah,
working on is called something like the Monsterologist. That's a working title. And it is more of a scientist kind of job. It is about you get to play an advanced job where you go out in the field and you study monsters in their natural habitat. You take kind of a Jane Goodall approach. You take photos or you draw sketches in your notebooks, and what you're specifically looking for is monster behaviors and monster patterns. So you're going to be using your I know about monster special dice to learn what kind of stuff monsters do, and your job ability is all about watching monsters when they use their special dice, so that the next time they use it, you can negate those special dice so they don't work. So it's a really powerful ability that allows you to shut down a monster's special dice on a one for one basis. It's kind of a non-combat job in the sense that it's not really about attacking monsters so much about studying them and manipulating their weaknesses.
Yeah, which I love. I think that's a really awesome idea, and I feel like, yeah, it's definitely different from the idea I had, but it
Hmm.
belongs, right? It
Right.
should be an advanced job on its own. Yeah, it's funny because, like, yeah, my idea for Monster Mage was more the idea of you were a mage who dealt in becoming a monster, right? You were making sort of blood contracts with the monsters you find, and you were learning their monster-specific special dice, right? You were meeting, some sort of flying bat monster, and you made a deal with it, and all of a sudden you had bat wings, right? You met
Right.
a big badger, and you made a deal with it, and now you have badger claws, right? So it was about sort of turning yourself into a monster and gaining the use of monster-specific dice like fly or fire breath or bite, and sort of becoming a monster on your own because of that. And so it's a weird idea because it sort of fits in both an advanced job and a monster job, and we may even play with that at some point and kind of expand on that concept.
I think there's actually a lot because we haven't done this yet, except a little bit with the Hunter of Yeld job that you can get. But the idea that your advanced job can become your monster job is really neat.
Mhm.
One of the advanced jobs I'm working on is the Grave Mage, who will use grave magic. But their main ability is that when a friend dies, they can bring them back to life. Except the version of them they bring back to life isn't a person; it's a zombie. And so they resurrect their friends as these undead monsters who have undead benefits and eat people and stuff like that. And when they resurrect you, when you resurrect your shepherd friend or your black mage friend, they're stuck as a zombie until they die again. And I think that's a lot of fun. And I think there's we try so we try to design each job and each advanced job around a certain mechanical part of the game. And the mechanic that I'm trying to design Grave Mage around is death and what you do with friends' dead bodies and monsters' dead bodies. And I think there's a lot of potential for really fun stuff. One of the things I really want to do with Grave Mage is that when you're turn 13 and it's time for you to become a monster, instead of choosing a monster job, you instead just become a zombie. The next time you die, you don't come back to life, and instead you just continue on as this walking corpse. And I think that's
Yeah.
has a lot of potential to be really gross and really fun and really interesting.
Yeah, always. I always think that getting a monster job is some of the most fun you can have because it adds such an interesting level of depth to the role playing you have to do, right? You've got this, horrible affliction now, and how are you going to handle it, right? How are your friends going to handle it?
Right.
So yeah, that's a super cool idea. Speaking of monster jobs, one of the ones that I've been working on for the new book is called the Basilisk Knight, or at least that's what I'm calling it for now. And the Basilisk Knight was all about the idea that you turn into just a giant monster, right? Sort of a centaur-esque creature where your lower half is the four-legged lizard monster, and your top half, of course, is still just you. And you're 8 feet tall, and your friends can ride on your back and treat you as if you were a war hare, right?
Right.
And you can use huge weapons really easily. So the Basilisk is all about getting to use huge weapons, and having special dice that are associated with using huge weapons. So that'll be a cool thing we get to expand on. I think in the main book, we only introduce the idea, but we don't really push any angles when it comes to special dice or job abilities, focusing on that. So that'll be really fun. But the downside, of course, to the Basilisk is that you have this destructive appetite, right? You are this massive creature. You require food. And so when you see a dead body on the action board in a fight, whether it's a monster or a friend, you are compelled to consume it, right? And so the issue is, if you consume a monster's body, that's no problem. But if you consume a friend's body, you're going to steal a restore roll from them, right? So you have to be careful and try, resist the urge to eat your friends, right?
Right. I think that's really cool. One of the things I love about all the monsters jobs is they have this built-in downside that purposely makes them difficult to play and difficult to be around. And unfortunately, something we hear from a lot of players is that they're afraid of their characters turning 13 and becoming monsters, and they don't want to take on a monster job because they see it as like a punishment. or something that's not fun. And that's been really disappointing to me, because I think the monster jobs are a lot of fun. One of the things we say so often when we're talking about Yeld is that we really believe that you have more fun when things are going horribly wrong. When things are not going your way, it's more fun in the game. And the monster jobs are definitely part of that. It's a very interesting role playing situation to be put in this job and have to confront
Yeah.
becoming a monster. So one of the things we want to do in our new book is we want to provide a lot more options for monster jobs, not just new monster jobs, and we have a bunch that we're going to be introducing, but also new things you can do as a monster. For example, we want to introduce something similar to mastery quests for monsters, where you can gain where you can for example, if you're a werewolf, maybe you can go on a quest to help you control your werewolf transformations and your werewolf rage. Or if you're a vampire, you might be able to go on a quest to gain some other benefits. We also want to look at ways that you can maybe regain some of your previous abilities from other jobs. Like, for example, if you were a shepherd and now you're a deep mage, maybe you can find a way to bring your flock back to you so they're willing to be around you again, even though you've become this monster of some kind. I'm really excited by the idea that becoming a monster isn't a dead end in Yeld. Instead, it's a new job that you get to continue to customize and grow as you keep playing.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the opportunity to play a game long enough where your characters have to change, right, is a great experience, right? I feel like because death is sort of off the table in Yeld, your characters don't permanently die. You have to have some level of threat, right? There has to be something that you're afraid of, right? And I feel like for a lot of players, that starts out as becoming a monster,
Yep.
right? But once you become that monster, it opens up all these really cool opportunities. And I think a lot of players do realize that once they get to that point and they can start role playing in fun ways, and they get entire, adventures dedicating to dealing with their affliction in whatever way that is, right? Whether that's, you're a werewolf, and so your adventure is about getting someone to craft you an unbreakable cage that you can, hide in to protect your friends, or you're a vampire, and so, you're trying to find like a blood bank somewhere that you can get your blood from instead of stealing it, right? There's a lot of fun stuff there, and I think the opportunity to play a character who's with this affliction and still being a hero is really fun.
Right. And there's an opposite to that too. You've become a monster, so if you want to, how far down the monster road do you want to go?
Yeah.
And are your friends willing to follow you down that path? Are you willing to become this gang of horrible monsters that maybe terrorizes Yeld or even tries to rule Yeld? I think that's an
Totally.
interesting path to go as well.
When I think talking about the idea of giving monster jobs sort of mastery quest, how that works now is that you get to spend your good dice or your evil dice to gain additional abilities to a job. And so I think we can expand on that with monster jobs, and good and evil in general will get a nice big expansion in this new book, allowing you to do new things, how new things to spend your good and evil dice on, or reasons to sort of hoard your good and evil dice so you have large amounts of them. It seems like players really like to have a bunch of these dice to sort of have a gauge of their own morality, which is neat. So definitely more.
Well, one of the things we hear from players all the time is, "I want to do more with my good and evil dice, and how do I get more good and evil dice?"
And
Sorry, I completely lost you, man. Oh, it looks like Nick logged out for the moment. While Nick is gone, let me go ahead and tell you about some of the other stuff that's going to be in the monster book. First of all, oh, hey,
hey,
we're really excited by the idea that while this book is going to present a lot of stuff for players in the form of new jobs and new special dice and new weapons and gear and stuff like that, it's also going to provide a huge amount of stuff for game masters. Of course, we'll have a bunch of monsters that you can put into your games, but we're also going to have a completely revised monster formula. We really like how the monster formula in our rulebook works right now, but it was kind of purposefully limited to begin with. We only had so much space to flesh it out, and I think even from day one we knew that eventually when we had the chance, we wanted to do a whole book devoted to monsters. So what you're going to see in the new book is a bigger and better monster formula that allows you to create more interesting and more complex and more varied monsters. And that's going to be combined with new rules for adding terrain and environment to your fights, as well as new tactics for setting up battles and new scenarios for having in fights. This is going to be the kind of thing that you're not going to want to bring it to every fight. Not every fight has to be an ambush in a cave, in the middle of the night. But instead, what this is going to allow you to do is to every now and then bring really interesting, unique features into your fights, and really change things up and take your players by surprise.
Yeah, we wanted to add in several things that I think we didn't get to touch on at all. Stuff like, what it's like to have mounted combat, what it's like to have some more unique terrain options outside of just water, right? In the main book, we talk about the effects of darkness, the effects of fire, the effects of water, but we don't talk really about any other types of terrain. So expanding on that, ways that the action board can be affected, I think there's going to be a lot of options for introducing fights that will get to challenge players who are really good at killing monsters, right? That's very, it can be easy to do, especially later on that you've built this character who's just, I squish monsters, right? And so as GM, this is going to be a whole new set of challenge those players, right?
I'm really excited about it. I've been brainstorming so many terrain rules over the last few months. Rules for fighting in lava fields, rules for fighting on cliff sides, in forests, in caverns. Special things like knocking stalagmites and stalactites over, or climbing trees and then jumping down on enemies. And at this point, I can't necessarily say all those things are going to make it into the game. Some of the stuff I've come up with is not great, but that's part of the design process. You come up with 50 ideas and then you end up using 10 of them. I think that's mostly what we wanted to talk about this evening. Do you have anything you want to add, or are you completely frozen? Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up. So let me recap real quick. Our Witch job guide is available for sale now. The Magical Index is going to be available next week in the middle of the month, and you can get that from our store as well. And then we are working on the Monster Hunter's Guide to Yeld, and we hope that we're going to be able to launch a Kickstarter for that book next spring. We don't want to put a date in stone. A year ago, we thought we were going to do the Kickstarter last summer, and that just didn't work out. But we think next spring is probably when it's going to happen. So we're really excited about that. And starting next month, starting in December, we're going to be showing previews for what we're working on. Some of the stuff we talked about this evening, you're going to be able to see in rules form through our Patreon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So similar to the Magical Index, we're going to sort of have this living document where we're going to be constantly introducing ideas from this book, right? Whether these are fully fleshed out concepts or sort of the alpha or beta versions of them, will, to be determined depending on what it is. But you're going to see, the new jobs, lots of rules for the new monster stuff. Even some of the more lore-heavy stuff we want to talk about. In the book, we definitely want to flesh out more about just the people of Yeld, the monsters of Yeld, how they act, what they do. And so we'll get to, introduce some of that as well. And so it'll just be a cool document, again, that you can come back to every month, and there's going to be a new thing in there that you get to explore, right?
So, yeah.
And luckily, as players get to play with these things... as players get their hands on this, hopefully, we'll get a chance to get some feedback on what's coming out and what maybe you guys would like to see as well. So yeah, that'll be starting next month. This month is Magical Index, but next month we're gonna have our first official like preview on the Patreon for the book.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add before we finish up here?
I don't know what I missed. What you had said when I had dropped out, so I think we're good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for watching the second episode of our Yeldcast. We'll probably do another one right at the beginning of the year. Have a great winter and a great holiday and New Year, and stay safe and stay warm.
Thanks, everybody.